Tomorrow, Neil and millions of other Scots will learn if they'll be forced to show proof of vaccination to use pubs, cinemas, theatres or gyms. Nicola Sturgeon expected to make a final call on whether to expand the current vaccine passport scheme beyond nightclubs to other hospitality venues, having warned this is the only way to avoid more significant restrictions.
Presiding Officer, the final mitigation measure I want to talk about today is the COVID certification scheme. It is the strong view of the Scottish Government that this, together with the other measures still in place, makes an important and proportionate contribution to stemming COVID transmission. We're also considering whether an expansion of the scheme to cover more settings would be justified and prudent, given the current state of the pandemic. Again, let me stress that we have not at this stage taken a decision to extend the reach of the scheme. However, to allow us to engage openly with businesses in the coming days about the pros, cons and practicalities, I can confirm that the kinds of settings that might be in scope would be indoor cinemas, theatres and some other licensed and hospitality premises.
Now, despite releasing a 70-page dossier that her critics say provides no evidence of vaccine passports having any significant impact, Sturgeon continues to dangle that threat over the heads of her people. Neil, why is Sturgeon still threatening Scots?
I think your guess is as good as mine, Dan, except that I would say I think it's irresistible. It's for a person in power, like a First Minister, like a Prime Minister, these COVID restrictions give them ongoing access to authority and power over people's lives. They've had it for the last 20 months or whatever, and I think it's demonstrably proving impossible for any of them to give up. They keep on giving themselves the background to do this. In Scotland and elsewhere, the testing, if you keep on testing healthy people and getting positive results, you will always be able to have the justification that's required to, extend restrictions, make more places off limits to those who aren't carrying health papers. But I think, in short, in answer to your question, I think it's power, and it's irresistible for characters like these politicians. Someone like Nicola Sturgeon, obviously, her special circumstances are that she exists, and her party, the Scottish National Party, exists to break Scotland out of the United Kingdom. She's been singularly impotent and unable to deliver that, and so she needs other things to underscore her position, to make herself relevant, and threatening or promising to extend the COVID restrictions is just to be seen to be doing something and being a powerful person.
And Neil, strangely, the mainstream media, or at least the majority, especially of the broadcast media, are looking away to what's going on across Europe. And I can't believe that. I mean, this is health apartheid. There are literally tens of thousands of people on the streets. Why is it that when those people were protesting the murder of George Floyd in the US, it was all over the broadcast media? When they're protesting a fundamental right as a human being in a democratic society to choose what medical procedure you have, it's almost been ignored.
Well, a central plank of the mainstream broadcast media's narrative is always taking any opportunity to suggest that large proportions of populations are in favour of this restriction and extensions to this and more lockdowns, and finding polls that say that the unvaccinated should be locked down. Now, the protests, as you say, London and in many European capitals and across towns and villages as well. It's not even just in the big population centres that these protests, these peaceful protests, are going on. But they run counter. The mainstream media don't want to, and the authorities don't want to acknowledge the reality that millions of people are up on their hind legs protesting against this, because they are pushing a message that, let's face it, after all, we're all in favour of restrictions, and I don't think that's the case. You can't overlook the fact that I've said it before, but big pharma, big tech, big mainstream media, if you follow their lines up to their ultimate owners, you arrive at BlackRock, Vantage, State Street, Vanguard at State Street. They're all the lines go up to the same point. So the message about the narrative around COVID, around the pandemic, around the vaccines, and in relation to these protests that they're not covering, it's all coming from the sharp end of a pyramid of power. And the narrative that we're hearing is being driven by the same people that are in favour of the vaccines, that are in favour of greater control and surveillance over our lives. In many ways, it's not mysterious.
Neil, they also seem to be in favour of our government taking a more authoritarian approach out of Westminster, which I think is quite extraordinary given what the population has been put through the past 20 months. But we see it, Neil,
yes,
in broadcasts like Good Morning Britain or the Jeremy Vine Show. I played a clip earlier where it's been discussed almost as something completely natural and normal that Brits might long-term snitch on their unvaccinated neighbours if they dare to leave the house. I mean, why is the media taking this position rather than saying, hang on, what's going on in Austria should never be exported here and we should all be standing up for our fundamental freedoms?
I think because there's an orthodoxy and a narrative that is being pushed, and certain things are to be talked about and other things are to be ignored, that a country like Austria is talking about full lockdown again, obviously, but mandating vaccines, and that Germany and other Central European countries look certain to follow suit. I find that terrifying, but most terrifying of all is never mind the mainstream media. It's the fact that our leaders are not speaking out in condemnation, or at the very least saying, let's think about this. But
Sajid Javid at the weekend, Neil, just said, "Oh, that's Austria's decision to make." I mean, hang on a moment, no.
We have to, as I don't believe that the people of Great Britain would tolerate this mandated vaccines. I think whatever else is happening on mainland Europe, I do not believe that the British people would allow it to happen here. Now, I'm not sure how you go about making not allowing something actually manifest itself in reality, but I don't think it would be allowed here, not by the people. I was listening to you earlier and you were talking about whether or not Boris Johnson was, a great leader. I think the fundamental difference between Boris Johnson and someone like Margaret Thatcher and someone like Churchill is that he is devoid of principle. He's a clever man, but he's dedicated only to self-aggrandisement. And I believe that he picked up the torch of Brexit only because he thought that it was a way to get into the hearts of a majority. And so indeed it did. It secured him his 80-seat majority. But I don't believe it was because it matched with his principles. I just think he stuck a wet finger up in the air, saw which way the wind was blowing, and decided that was the way that he would face. He is not a principled politician. That is the fundamental difference between someone like him and someone like Churchill and someone like Thatcher. Whether you like those other politicians or not, they were people of conviction and people of principle. He is not, and I don't think he's unique in that. I think they're a product of the political class and the political climate that has developed here, during a large part of my adult life. I think the career politicians, the professional politicians, they're driven by opinion polls and what they think will get them into power and keep them in power, which is profoundly different from having principles and seeking to stand by them. What's with the situation in Austria and Germany, what you've got there are people like Johnson and Gove and the rest of them are looking on to see if it looks like being something that's a vote winner or something that will secure their position. So they don't have a principle about it. If they did, they would have already got up in Parliament or somewhere else and said,
they're coming here and don't even consider bringing them here.
The fact that they haven't done that tells you all you need to know. That tells you that they're watching it. They're watching it and they've got it in their back pocket as something that they would do if they thought it would secure their position. They are not principled people.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.